Number the tissue whisperer, the memory still burns hotter than any fire I've ever seen. I remember the day my father called me into his study, the smell of old paper and stale coffee thick in the air. He slammed a folder onto the mahogany desk and said, "This is madness, Lena. You want to grow human tissue in our house. After everything we sacrificed." My mother had already left the room, her silence heavier than any argument. My younger brother had run out of the house entirely, tears streaming down his face like he'd been struck by lightning. And I stood there holding my research notes, feeling the weight of 1,000 years of judgment pressing down on my chest. They called me a fool, an embarrassment, a waste of our inheritance. My father said I would never amount to anything, that I was chasing ghosts while others built real lives. My mother whispered that I was throwing away our future on some whim. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. That impossible dream of turning dead cells back into living tissue, of healing bodies that had been broken beyond repair. That was my purpose. That was my truth. And then came the theft. My colleague Dr. Vasquez, the man who'd been my mentor, had been working on something similar when I presented my findings at the conference. He saw my work as competition, as a threat to his own reputation. Within weeks, he published papers claiming similar results under his name. The journal editors praised him. The funding boards greenlit his projects. My name disappeared from the scientific record. The whispers followed me everywhere, academics, investors, even my own family, who now looked at me with pity rather than pride. But I refused to let them win. Leaving home was the hardest thing I've ever done. I packed a single suitcase and walked out of my childhood bedroom, past the door where my parents used to hang my school uniform. The world outside felt alien, strange, like I was seeing it for the first time. I moved to a small apartment in the city, where I worked odd jobs to keep food on the table. I spent nights in libraries, reading everything I could find about cell culture, protein synthesis, tissue engineering. I learned languages, studied mathematics, and kept my head down, determined to prove them wrong. The years were brutal. There were rejections after rejections, grants denied, papers dismissed. Colleagues who remembered my early work began to question whether I was serious enough to continue. Some even tried to sabotage me, spreading rumors that I was unstable, that my methods were unscientific. But I pressed forward. I refined my techniques. I built my own laboratory in a converted warehouse, surrounded by bioreactors and sterile equipment. I was alone, yes, but I was also finally free. The breakthrough came slowly. First, I grew simple skin grafts, then cartilage, finally muscle tissue. Each step was a battle against skepticism, against the voices in my head that said I was chasing fantasy. But I kept going, because somewhere deep inside I knew the truth. What my family called science fiction nonsense was actually the future of medicine. Years passed, decades. I watched my research evolve from a hobby into a revolution. My team expanded. We developed new protocols, new applications. We started treating patients with diseases that had no cure, spinal cord injuries, organ failure, degenerative conditions. Barren lands across the country became thriving ecosystems thanks to my work. I wasn't just growing tissue anymore. I was restoring life itself. And then, one autumn evening, I returned home. My father was sitting on his porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. My mother was inside preparing dinner. My brother was nowhere to be seen, probably too busy celebrating with friends, unaware of the reunion about to happen. When I arrived, the house felt different, warmer, more alive. And I could see it, the changes I'd made, the world I'd created. He looked up as I entered and his eyes widened, not with recognition but with something far more dangerous, disappointment, disbelief. The same look he'd given me when I was a child before I'd ever dared to dream. "You're really here," he said quietly. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I am," I replied, stepping closer. "I'm so sorry." He didn't respond. Instead, he rose from his chair and walked toward me, each step deliberate, heavy with years of unexpressed anger. He stopped inches from my face, and I could feel the tension radiating off him like heat. "Do you understand what happened to us?" he asked. "All those years, all those sacrifices, you think because you succeeded it means nothing, that the people who laughed at you, the ones who called you a fool, are somehow justified." I wanted to explain. I wanted to tell him about the stolen research, about Dr. Vasquez and his betrayal, about the countless hours I'd spent fighting to prove myself right. But the words died in my throat. What mattered was this moment, the way he held me, the way his hand trembled slightly as he reached for mine. Then he kissed me. Hard, desperately, like he was trying to erase every word of mockery that had ever been spoken to me. When he pulled away, his eyes were wet. "I thought you'd never come back," he said. "I thought you'd give up, but you did. You actually did." That night I sat with my family and showed them everything. The data, the patient records, the images of restored organs, rebuilt nervous systems, revived lives. I spoke about the fields I'd transformed. Desert regions now teeming with biodiversity. Hospitals where death was no longer inevitable. Children born healthy after decades of preventable disease. My father stared at the screens, his expression shifting from shock to something harder to read. Slowly, painfully, he began to cry. Not loud sobs, but quiet, steady tears that ran down his weathered cheeks. My mother put her arms around both of us, and for the first time in years, I saw the love she'd hidden behind criticism. It was never about being an embarrassment, I told them. It was about saving lives, about giving people a chance they never had. The realization hit me then, not just that I'd won, but that I'd earned the right to be proud. The mockery hadn't been about my dreams. It had been about my courage. Every insult, every dismissive glance, every cruel comment had only strengthened my resolve. They wanted me to fail. They wanted me to quit, but I refused. As dawn broke over the landscape I'd helped create, I understood something important. The greatest revenge wasn't destroying those who mocked you. It was becoming exactly what they couldn't deny. I had turned their ridicule into legacy. I had proven that the future belongs to those brave enough to pursue it, even when everyone says it's impossible. And as my family embraced me, I knew that the ledger was finally balanced. Every tear, every laugh, every moment of doubt had led to this moment of peace, this proof that persistence beats prejudice every time. I was a regenerative biologist, I was a miracle worker, and I was finally irrevocably whole. The end.